Hi, everyone, and welcome to Katie Couric. After 47 weeks, a novel called The Help is still on the New York Times bestseller list, and as of this taping, is at the very top, #1. I'm joined today by the author, Kathryn, a.k.a. Kitty Stockett, and we're going to hear from book clubs in Ohio and Washington, D.C. today as well. And as always, I'd like to say a big thank you to our sponsor, Dove. Kathryn Stockett, so nice to meet you.
Thank you,
Should
Katie.
I call you Kitty or Kathryn?
Either one.
Well,
it depends on what kind of mood you're in.
I think I'm in a kitty mood, so I'll call you Kitty.
Kitty.
First of all, I just want to say congratulations. I mean, you must be walking on air. Your first novel, it is a phenomenon. I mean, that's an overused word, but I think in this case, not at all. Hugely successful. A friend of mine said she went on vacation recently, and everyone she saw was reading The Help on the beach. Tell me how you're feeling about this extraordinary success.
I think the truest word I can use is surprised. I had no idea. You know, I started writing The Help, gosh, right after 9/11. Really out of homesickness more than anything. I just wanted to hear those voices, you know, from my past. I was living in New York City. I missed my family and my friends from Mississippi. And so I started writing in the voice of Dimitri, which was the African-American woman who had worked for our family, gosh, for 50 years. She started working for my great-great-great-aunt Carrie as a second cook. And it was just such an incredible relationship because she went from Aunt Carrie then to my grandmother and then consequently, you know, raising my father, my uncle, and then all the grandkids. So she was such an important figure in our family. And I won't use the phrase that I think is so overused, and that is she was like part of the family, because you know, therein lies the irony that is the relationships of blacks and whites in Mississippi.
And in much of the South, especially during the period about which you write. Now, I was curious, how old are you, Kathryn? Because you weren't born, I'm assuming, during the period of time your book is written.
I am 40, and the book takes place, it opens up in 1962.
Right.
So it was a little bit before, you know, my generation came along, but I have to tell you, not a whole lot changed in Mississippi from the 60s to the early 70s. It changed on the law books, for sure, but not a lot had changed in the kitchens of the white homes.
And you know, so much of this book is about the uneasy, complicated relationship. I think really it's between any sort of person who has someone who is subservient to them working in their homes. It's a strange intimacy, yet this very clear power structure.
Well, then you add on to that, you know, the difficult and sort of unspoken rules of the South between blacks and whites, and then you throw it in the middle of, you know, the hotbed of the civil rights era, and it was a very complex time. And you know, I was taught not to talk about it. You didn't talk about the differences between blacks and whites and how we were treated in our relationships. You just left that alone. That was for the politicians. It was something that nice young ladies didn't discuss.
Did you ever question it? I mean, obviously, one of your main protagonists, Skeeter, is a very sort of self-actualized, socially conscious young woman who really evolves, I think, in her views of this relationship and of the times. And when you were younger, did you ever say to your parents, you know, what's going on here, or was it just so much a part of the fabric of your life? You did just accept it.
I never questioned any of it. And
do you feel guilt about that in some ways?
I feel a little ashamed to admit that it wasn't until I was 30, you know, 30 years old, maybe 35, that I really started to question and think about, for the first time in my life, what Dimitri must have been thinking and feeling as she was taking care of our family. It never occurred to me to wonder what she was thinking.
And I thought it was so interesting in the afterword, which I thought was so moving, because then you really realized where many of these characters emanated, from where they emanated. That you write at one point, I probably should have pulled the quote out, but you thought she was lucky to work for this sort of good white Christian family. Didn't you say something along those lines?
I did, and I really, you know, was embarrassed to bare my soul like that, but we did. We were a proprietary white family who felt like she was lucky to have us, when the truth is we were so lucky to have her.
And I know that Dimitri died when you were 16 years old.
That's right.
And you also write that you wish you had had a chance to ask her to sit down as you did, or ask, see, I'm making it autobiographical, and I know it's not.
I can't tell people enough. It's fiction.
I know.
I can't tell my family enough. It's fiction.
I know. We'll get to that in a moment. Do you wish you had had an opportunity to talk to Dimitri, your housekeeper growing up, just as Skeeter, the character in the book, was really able to get the story of Aibileen and Minnie?
You know, I think about Dimitri, and I think about how I never once saw her out of her white uniform.
Did you ever go to her house?
At one time, I went to my house, and there was actually a lot of my friends went to their housekeepers' houses and hung around, and that was more of a geographical issue. She just didn't. She lived on the other side of the tracks, and I wasn't really allowed to go over there, you know, unless we were taking her home, and then I wasn't allowed to get out of the car. But one time, my family took a trip to Los Angeles. You know, my father took the kids, and my brothers and sisters all got to take friends, but I was the youngest. I think I was about 8 years old, so I wasn't allowed to take a friend that far, so I said, I want to take Dimitri. So Dimitri and I had our own hotel room, and I just remember at 8 years old opening up the closet door to hang up my clothes, and on her side of the closet were 3 white uniforms. You know, in my naive head, she was coming with me as a companion.
As a friend.
Exactly. In her mind, she knew she was there as you know, as my, I guess, I don't know what the right word is. She was there, you know, as part of her job.
Yeah, she was there as an employee.
The only time I ever saw Dimitri out of her white uniform was when she was in the casket.
When you were 16. We're joined by a couple of book clubs because I thought that would be fun. So we're doing this newfangled thing called Skype. It's not that newfangled, but we've got a book club from Columbus, Ohio. They also blog for Ohio moms, and someone named Vanessa is hosting this gathering, and she's joined by Kelly, Amy, and Abby. So I want you all to each have an opportunity to ask Kathryn a question. So Vanessa, what would you like to ask Kathryn about the help?
Sure, Kathryn, and thank you so much for having us here. We're so excited to have an opportunity to interact with the two of you. My question is, as I was reading The Help, I was so gripped by the sense of danger that everybody was in. And at the end, not to spoil it for anybody who hasn't read it, but at the end, when it ended up pretty optimistic for all 3 of the main characters, I was a little surprised. And I wonder, did you consider having things not work out as well for at least one of the 3?
There is no way I could have harmed any of my main female characters. I just didn't have it in my heart to do it. And also, you know, at the ending of The Help, Aibileen is walking down in the street in the sunshine, and, you know, her heart's broken, but at the same time, she's walking into a new era. The Civil Rights Act had just been passed. She was walking into a time where she didn't have to wear her white uniform to walk into the white grocery store anymore. So I really wanted to give that sense of, oh, okay, we're walking into better times. But, you know, of course, Minnie, you know, her life didn't change too much, except she finally, we hope, gets out from under the thumb of her abusive husband. But yeah, I like the idea of them walking into a new era.
Let's go to the book club at Politics and Prose, a wonderful bookstore in Washington, D.C. And Vivian, Eileen, Michelle, and Carrie are joining us from that bookstore. And I'm sure you guys have questions. I'm just going to call on you like I'm a teacher, but I don't really know how else to do it. Vivian, how about you? Hi, ladies. Nice to see you. I'm from the Washington area, and I love that bookstore, so it's fun to have you.
Hi, Katie. Thanks for inviting us. Hello, Kitty.
Hey.
Delighted to be able to discuss your book. One of the questions that I had was how has it been received in the South, particularly in Mississippi, amongst both the black population and the white population? Has there been any feedback as to what the black community thinks about it, given that it's written by a white woman?
Let me just say, first of all, you know, Mississippi is not, as much as we would like to think of it as one small town, it is a very diversely populated, large, you know, state, and people have all kinds of opinions, black and white, and I have to say, I could never speak for the population as a whole. Individuals approach me and tell me how they feel about the book, and luckily, usually they don't approach me unless they liked the book. Fortunately, the ones that don't like the book keep it to themselves for the most part. But you know, one of the most prominent African Americans that's reached out to me is Vernon Jordan, who I adore. You know, he has that gorgeous, eloquent radio voice, and he called me one day and said, "Kitty," that's how he talks, "Kitty." He said, "I like The Help because I was The Help." He was the chauffeur for the mayor of Atlanta when he was young, and I was so touched, first of all, that he would even take the time to reach out, but also that he felt like he, as an African-American man, identified with these women. And then also another thing happened to me that really touched me was a very prominent African-American actress told the director of The Help, the film, the soon-to-be film, that she felt like the role of Aibileen was going, whoever played that role had a huge responsibility because they would be representing so many women in the United States. And it really struck me when I heard that, because that is not a responsibility that I was cognizant of as I was writing the book. I thought I was writing, you know, a very personal story about a unique situation, and I didn't know that it would relate to so many different people across the United States and across the world. I'm humbled by the emails and the correspondence that I get, that people. You know, the best compliment I think I've gotten from blacks and whites is that you made me feel, let me rephrase this, you showed me what it was like to be somebody else when I was inside those pages. And I think as a writer, that is the best compliment you can get. Not everybody in Jackson, Mississippi is thrilled.
Yeah, you know, in fact, I was going to ask you about that because I understand that even some of your family members are really peeved at you for writing this. Is that right? And some aren't even talking to you?
A few, but not a large number.
But close family members, right?
Close family members.
Gosh, that must be...
But the majority of them have been incredibly supportive. My mom, my dad, my stepmother, my brothers and sisters are honestly so relieved that it finally got published, because as you can imagine, with 50, 60 rejections under my belt, they had to listen to me feel sorry for myself that many times.
Well, don't you want to call every one of those literary agents and say, "Yo, it's Kathryn Stockett. Have you checked out the New York Times bestseller list this week?" Click. No. I'm sort of, vindictive that way.
No way. No way. I got to tell you.
I know, I'm kidding, but in a way, do you feel like, ha, ha, ha?
I tell you, that put a fire under my seat. Every time I would get a rejection letter, I'd feel sorry for myself, and then I'd get over it, and I would do whatever I could to make the story better, make it more true. And I think,
so you rewrote it? I mean, you finessed it every time you got a rejection letter?
I did.
Really?
I did. And even if it wasn't specific, because half the time they were a form letter where they would check the box of why they didn't like it.
That's cold.
But it makes you go back and revisit your work and keep pushing ahead.
Now, I know that you've written also that you felt slightly uncomfortable. Well, that it it was hard to write in the language of an African-American maid in the early 60s. I have an exact quote, but maybe you can just help me out by saying what you've said about that, Kathryn. And I'm curious because I know you have been criticized by some African-Americans as, why did she give us a dialect and give the white women no dialect? And I know you have an answer to that.
My grandmother spoke so properly. My stepmother speaks so properly. Almost all of my friends' parents spoke this beautiful, just Southern eloquence. And, you know, honestly, I just wrote it like I remembered it. And now, my generation, we speak a little more loosely and with a little more slang, but my mother's generation, oh gosh, the language is lovely. But I have to say, I think the African-American language is lovely as well. And I liked putting the two on the page together.
Was that hard to do? Because, you know, I would read it, and of course you become totally immersed in it, but it took me a little bit to get adjusted to the language that you would use for Abilene or Constantine or Minnie. How did you do that, basically? Did you study it? Did you talk to African-American friends of yours? I'm just curious.
Really, I was living in New York, writing, you know, channeling the voices of my childhood, of Dimitri and the black women that I had known. It felt pretty natural to me, and I'll be the first one to admit I didn't get it all right, but I just played it back like a tape recorder, and it felt right.
Does it hurt when people say, gee, you know, suggesting that somehow you were elevating the white characters in a way that you weren't the African-American characters in the book?
Well, it doesn't hurt, but it puzzles me because, you know, Jackson, Mississippi, we viewed ourselves as sort of this elite community of educated, rather sophisticated Southerners. So,
well, you have a pretty impressive literary provenance too there,
do,
right? You know, with Eudora Welty, you know, and Faulkner
was rather eloquent. And so, unless you've lived in that bubble, yeah, I could see why you would question it.
Let me go back to some of our book club members. Let's go back to Ohio if we could and see if Kelly or Amy or Abby have a question. Ladies, anybody?
Sure. Hi, Kathryn.
Hey.
I'm Abby.
Hey.
I was wondering, Katie touched on it a little bit about the fallout from your family since you were raised not to cross these racial lines. And you did cross them in this book so well. I wanted to know about the fallout from that, and also what changed. You said you didn't think anything of Dimitri's situation until you were 30 or 35. Was it just moving away?
You know, 9/11 wasn't my personal tragedy. We were so lucky that we were spared, but I got to tell you, I had taken a month off of work, and just, you know, I was working in a very business-oriented job in the magazine business and, you know, working my butt off. And I took a month off to do something creative. And I was working on this story that was just really rotten. And if you know me, you'll know how stubborn I am. I want to get it right. So I sat down and I convinced myself that I could turn this other story I was working on around. And the next day was 9/11. And I realized, you know, I don't know, maybe September 12th, that I wanted to write about my family and try to revisit those voices that I'd heard and really just talk to my family. We didn't have any phone service. We didn't have any internet service. Our cell phones didn't work. And so this was really a source of comfort for me. I had no idea it was going to turn into a book. It was just a short story in the voice of Dimitri that essentially is the first chapter.
And Kelly, you wanted to ask about the book's dedication, and you had another good question as well.
Oh, hi.
That's you. Hi, Kelly.
Hi. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I just love this book. This is probably the best book I've ever read.
Oh, that's so nice.
I was just curious if you ever considered dedicating the book to Dimitri.
Do you guys have a tea kettle on there or something? I keep hearing. It must be the computer or something. She was asking if you thought about dedicating the book to Dimitri.
I did. Instead, I put a special thank you to Dimitri in the acknowledgments, and it says, "Thank you for putting up with us." But my grandfather was still alive when The Help was published, and I wanted him to read that dedication. He's the best storyteller I've ever known.
And Kelly also wanted to know about the sincerity of relationships between families and their domestics. In what way, Kelly?
Oh, if it ever, if you ever thought, well, was I just a job to her? And that would be kind of upsetting, I would think, because I think probably in the white family's eyes, you felt like it was done for love. And did this ever make you turn around and think, was I ever just a job?
I think the book is an exploration of the answer to that question. And Dimitri told me she loved me, and I never knew her to lie. So I believe that she did, but that doesn't mean that that was the case in every job. And actually, I was addressing a group of readers in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I said that very thing, that Dimitri loved me, and I know she did. And an African-American woman stood up in the crowd and said, "She didn't love you. You just think she did." And it was hard to hear, but it was also a real awakening, because I know it's a very complex relationship. Right. We loved these women, and we expected them to raise our children and to cook our food, yet we didn't allow them to use the same silverware in the house. I knew families that didn't allow their help to put their lunch in the same refrigerator as the white family. A lot of irony behind that.
And I think it really must depend from person to person. I mean, I think Abilene's love is so present in this book for Mae Mobley. I'm acting like I know these people. This is, I think, the power of this book. But I think, I think probably Minnie was a little more pragmatic about her relationship with her families and had a little more anger. So I think it really, don't you think it just varies from relationship to relationship? I don't think you can say that for all people it was just a job, or that all the maids loved the children they were caring for. It just
Absolutely. And let me tell you, the lesson of every Southerner, and really every American, is don't stereotype. You can't put everybody in the same basket. But I will say, I found, as I did interviews and spoke to blacks and whites, that it was different really from generation to generation. So if the black help had a very business-like relationship with, the woman of the house, they at the same time might have had a very loving relationship with the children. So it wasn't always as cut and dry as we'd like to think.
Did you find that, while it's not autobiographical, that pieces of your life sort of seep through some of these individual stories? Because I thought of you as maybe Mae Mobley as a little girl, kind of with some of your memories that might have informed that particular story of Abilene and her charge. And then I thought about you as an older girl. You were saying how you were never pretty, but Dimitri always would. I find that very hard to believe, but you had stringy brown hair, you said, and were kind of awkward, but she always made you feel beautiful. Yes, she had an aversion to the bathtub.
Couldn't pay me to take a bath.
But are there some things about your life, I guess there must be, that inform all these stories in a certain way?
I think I probably have more in common with Celia Foote in the book than I'd be generally willing to admit. So
really?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of me in all those characters, good and bad. I mean, we've all done things we've been ashamed of, or thought things that just, came from God knows where. So, it is fiction.
Did you know Girls Like Hilly?
Yes.
I just hated her so much.
Every once in a while, I would sort of hit a wall and say, no one was this bad. No, and no young woman spoke out about it. And then I had this footage from when they integrated the Little Rock High School in the late 50s. And there it was, the evidence was on screen. These nice young white ladies, you know, probably 14 or 15 years old in their white gloves, yelling on national TV into the camera, keep them out of our school, using the N-word, saying things that you never thought you would hear a nice, you know, well-bred Southern woman say. And every time I doubted myself with Hilly, I would go back and watch that footage, and I knew it existed.
And see the hatred.
The hatred.
Pure hatred. Somebody Twittered us or tweeted us, Paula WBZ, and it sort of goes along with what you were saying about some of the white families not allowing their black help to put the sandwiches in the same refrigerator or their lunch. She says, I know, a woman I know said for the first time she realized why there was a bathroom in the garage of her Southern childhood home.
Yeah.
You know, that women reading this book are thinking, oh my gosh, this is the basis of this segregated house. Was that really that common, that they put toilets in the garage so the black maids couldn't, because of a fear of disease, so that the black maids couldn't use the family bathroom?
I can't say it was always from the fear of disease, but it's just the way things were done.
Well, that's how it is in the book, by the way. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was just the way things were done, and a proper household had separate facilities. And even when you go to look at an apartment in New York that's on Fifth Avenue, there's always a toilet off the kitchen, and that was for the help.
Well, it's called the maid's room
and
in many of these apartments.
In some cases it still is. We just appreciated having another bathroom.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is Dimitri's bathroom that was on the side of my grandparents' house, which was no different from any other household that I knew of, you know, that door has stayed closed since she died, and I don't think anyone's been in there since.
Let's go back to politics and prose, because I don't want to ignore my friends in Washington. Ladies, does anyone there have another question for Kathryn/Kitty?
Kitty, you have written the book that I wish that I'd written. My master's thesis on this topic, and I was born in Atlanta in 1960. So I'm sitting here with a lot of emotion, needing to blow my nose on my sleeve or something, because I brought with me the picture of my own maid from childhood. And so the book really resonates, and I think you've written a really true book. But I would love to hear you comment on the line in the book where Skeeter's speaking, and she says, Constantine's love for me began with missing her own child. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, you know, that actually might have been rather presumptuous of Skeeter to say that, because Katie brought up the incredible point of, you know, we assumed that they loved us like they loved their own children, and that wasn't always the case. But I think in Constantine's case, I mean, I wrote it, so I actually get to control the minds of these characters. I think in Constantine's case, it's the truth. You know, she was missing her own daughter, and the second best thing she had was Skeeter.
Let's go back to Ohio, where we have one more question from our book club in Columbus. I'm not sure who has this question. Amy, maybe?
Yeah, I had a question. First of all, thanks again. It's so exciting to talk to you both. I like to hear about how novels come to be, and I read somewhere, I think on NPR, I listened to you, that it took 5 years for you to write this. During those 5 years, did you go home a lot? And did you, you said that you had performed interviews, talked with people, but did you go home to your hometown a lot? And did you talk to people from your childhood, actually?
I did. I always tried to strike up a conversation at a dinner table in Mississippi, anywhere that I was in the South. But like I was telling Katie, really, I felt uncomfortable conducting, you know, very formal interviews, because I knew that people would instantly freeze up. African Americans really probably weren't comfortable talking to a white girl about what it was like to raise, you know, white children. And so I tried to make it a little more organic and just say, you know, where have you worked? Where have you been with this family for a long time? And that's where the really great stories came out, and I appreciated that. And you know, I would never give up my sources, but it was nice. People like to talk about it, and in almost every case, They could tell me where those kids were today. You know, they still send me Christmas cards. They still call me on my birthday. Some of those relationships, it's incredible how close they were.
It is weird, though, when someone would then go on to a different family, and I think Aibileen took care of, what, 17 kids, you know, during her career as a maid, and I think it must have been hard. Again, you can't generalize or stereotype for some, as we saw in the book, for these relationships for the maids to end, because they were very close, especially in the case where they were in many ways surrogate mothers to these children for whatever reason. I guess back then it wasn't because so much about working mothers, but just incapable mothers, I guess, in Elizabeth's case.
And I think the real heartbreak was not so much when they had to leave the child, but as they were watching the children grow up and hit the age of, I don't know, 11 or 12, and then suddenly the children are not colorblind anymore, and they become socialized and start to understand the rules and the laws that existed back then between blacks and whites. That, to me, is the heartbreak.
That's why Aibileen had all those secret stories that she wanted to shape Mae Mobley, and then they got to fire that terrible teacher. You guys, can you tell I just finished this book? I am so into it. It's ridiculous. But, you know, we have to, before we go, because I have to get ready to do the news tonight, but you know, I think both book clubs, and I know I am very excited about the movie, although I'm a bit mixed, because I think I've never seen a movie as good as a book, except for in the case of possibly To Kill a Mockingbird, because I'm in love with Gregory Peck. But, you know, this is being made into a movie, and I think I want the ladies to hear, because it's so funny. The director is a childhood friend of yours, which is so random.
Oh, gosh, Tate Taylor is incredible. He and I went to grammar school together and high school, and we were troublemakers, I will admit. And if you had asked Tate in school, what do you want to be when you grow up, he would have said, I want to be in film. And if you'd asked me, I would have said, I want to be a writer. And here we are, you know, 30 years later, making trouble again.
I know. So how did this happen? You wrote the book, and you guys kept in touch, and you always had the understanding that he would direct something you wrote?
Well, you know, he sat down with me one day and he goes, you know, this book you're writing, you know you have to give me the film rights. And, you know, we fight like brother and sister. And I said, well, you know, it's not going to be that easy. But we worked out a deal. And really what is so important here is that Tate is from Jackson, Mississippi. Brunson Green, the producer, who is Tate's production partner, is from Jackson, Mississippi. They're going to be Mississippians that know how to tell a true story. Even though it's fiction, it's a fable, they can stick to the truth of the help.
Well, I have been casting it for the last several weeks, and have any characters been cast?
Octavia Spencer, who is an incredible African-American actress, originally from Alabama. She's going to play the part of Minnie. And I'll tell you, I've known Octavia long enough to say that she really was a lot of my inspiration for the character.
Really?
Oh, Octavia will tell you exactly what is on her mind.
Oh, okay.
And she has all the sass, and she's also brilliant, and she's an incredible actress. It is my understanding that Allison Janney will play the part of Mother.
Skeeter's mom.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens, you know, after that.
Have they started casting it? Do you want to hear my ideas?
I would love to hear.
Okay, I want the book clubs to hear, because I want them to weigh in on this, because I think they probably have some ideas. Okay, we've decided. Our whole office has read this book, and we're really into it, as you can tell. So we think that Hilly should be played by Reese Witherspoon.
Oh, wouldn't that be great?
What do you think?
I would love it. She might... I don't know. I mean, I loved her in Election. I think she can totally pull off that.
I think she could be, because she has this something, you know, that she can be very unlikable, which I think is a sign of a good actress. I think, what about Amy Adams for Elizabeth LaFoot, right?
Yeah, Leafault. I think she'd be incredible.
Don't you think she'd be good? Because she could be sort of mousy, and she's so under Hilly's thumb.
And we have to remember, these girls in the book are 23, 24 years old.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it was a challenge for us to cast it. Because every time we thought of actresses, we'd say, oh, no, she's too old. What about Kirsten Dunst for Skeeter?
Oh, wow, that would be great.
Don't you think? Can I be your casting director?
But how can we make Kirsten Dunst not look beautiful, you know?
Well, you know what? I thought, you know, she has a little bit of a bump on her nose. I think she could pull off the skinny, awkward thing. And I think we could make her hair look frizzy, and then it gets really pretty when she gets more of a hippie type.
Let me tell you, they're going to shoot it in Mississippi. I guarantee you her hair will be frizzy.
Yeah. Okay, so wait. Who else do we have to... I don't know. Wait,
Aibileen, I think, is going to be the toughest one to cast.
Aibileen is going to be so hard. You need someone almost, you know, Cicely Tyson in stature, but she's too, I think, a little bit too senior, no offense, Cicely, to play Aibileen at this point. And Aibileen's a big woman.
Matronly and someone maternal.
How about Epatha Merkerson or whatever from Law and Order? I was thinking maybe about her. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. And it carries, you know, like the black actress said, it carries some responsibility.
Yeah.
Because she is so subtle and does not speak her mind outright. So she's going to have to convey these feelings just through good acting.
Yeah. Stewart, I can't really think of somebody for Stewart yet. I'm working on that. You have to have Tate call me.
They're not that many roles for
check
men.
in with my book clubs. Hey, ladies, do you guys have any ideas for the characters? And are you as weird as I am? Were you sort of thinking about this as you read the book? DC?
I think we should leave it to you.
You're doing a good job.
I think we should leave it to you.
Now it's turned into a movie.
Anybody have any idea?
What about Monique?
Monique, I thought about Monique too.
From Precious.
Yeah, I thought about Monique. Washington ladies, what about you? Do you guys have any ideas for casting?
We were Washington.
Well, first we thought we should leave it to you because it sounds like you have lots of good ideas. Anybody? And then Precious.
Yeah. Well, we were the ones who just said Monique.
Yes, right.
Monique, yeah. I was thinking Gabourey Sidibe is too young, I think, actually, to play any of the characters. And ladies in Washington, do you worry about making a movie out of a book that you loved and cherished so much? Because I'm always a bit reticent when I go to the movie theater and they've made a movie into the book that I see in my mind's eye. And suddenly it becomes, you know, it's on the big screen, and I'm like, no, that's not what Minnie looks like.
Yeah, I think that can be a problem. And these characters are so well drawn, and I have such a clear idea about what they look like and what their mannerisms are. You know, it will have to be perfect for me.
Yeah, and before we go, Kathryn, what are you working on now? Because I know you're writing another novel, correct?
I am.
Tell us all what it's about.
Oh gosh, it takes place during the Great Depression.
In Mississippi?
Also in Mississippi, in a little town called Oxford, where Ole Miss is.
Yeah.
And it is about a group of women who break the rules. You know, they don't have any men in their lives supporting them, so they learn to break the rules to just to get by.
And where are you in the process?
I'm about a third of the way through. There have been a lot of good interruptions this year.
Yeah, exactly. Do you worry, you know, like I worry for Liam Neeson, will never be a role like Schindler's List. Do you worry that, every book I write is going to be compared to this, and how can I compete with myself?
I'm terrified.
If you weren't, now you are?
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. Well, good luck with it. And thank you so much for this wonderful book. Obviously, it's resonating with so many people, and I'm just thrilled for you. What an exciting thing to happen to someone for their first novel, and you know. Anyway, continued success, and I've been so excited about talking to you. Before we go, I brought a little present for you. You have to have the book clubs up because it's kind of a visual thing, Eric. Whoa, wait a second, Cedric. Thank you. Anyway, I brought you a chocolate pie, minus one key ingredient.
Oh, thank you very much. I don't know if I can eat it.
Yeah, well, anyway, we thought that would be a cute little thing.
From Magnolia Bakery.
Yeah, exactly. Lady, that's appropriate, Magnolia Bakery.
Absolutely.
For a Mississippi girl. Well, everybody in Ohio and Washington, D.C., ladies, thank you so much for being part of this. It was really fun to have you, and Kathryn, again, thanks to you, and enjoy that chocolate pie. We thought it would be fascinating to travel to Jackson, Mississippi, the setting of Kathryn Stockett's novel, to get reaction from women who are members of book clubs in that town, and they're joining me via Skype from Lemuria Bookstore in Jackson. And from left to right, we have Sandra Grady and then May Covington. And then on the right is Sally Fran Ross. Nice to talk to you all. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me start with you, Sally Fran, because you and May Covington, who you're sitting next to, have a very special and wonderful connection. Tell me what that is.
Okay. Well, May and I are about 10 years apart, age-wise, but her mother worked for my family all of my life and retired from working for my family. And so I got to know May through Mamie, her mama, all those years.
And May, and you obviously have kept up with Sally Fran, and you all formed a lifelong relationship because of your mom?
Of course.
And what was it like for your mom? You know, obviously the help is so much about the relationship between white families and African-American maids in the early 1960s during a very volatile period of time in our nation's history. But from your perspective, what was it like being the daughter of someone who cared for Sally Fran's family and her siblings?
It was great because my mom and Sally Fran and her sister had great relationship. It was not like a black and white thing. I'm not so sure it was like that with her mom and dad, but with the kids, it was just all natural.
So you felt there was a lot of love between your mom and the white children, well, Sally Fran, and I guess you had siblings, Sally Fran?
I do. Lee, my sister.
And how would you describe the relationship from your perspective? Because it seems a little bit like May Mobley and Abilene in the book.
Are you talking to me or May?
Yes, I'm talking to you, Sally Fran. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I don't know about the early years. I really wasn't aware of the sacrifices that Mamie was making for us. I mean, I was very centered on my own life, and it wasn't until civil rights stuff sort of started, and I became aware of that I realized that Mamie had a whole nother life, and there were sacrifices that she was making for us. So we sort of developed two different relationships. I had the relationship with Mamie in front of my parents, and then I had the relationship with Mamie outside of my parents, and they were really different. And I got an opportunity to get to know May and her family, but they were very separate from my parents.
And May, did you resent it all, having your mom away so much of the time, caring for this whole second family? Because I know that you have said that she wasn't around much for your brother, Chester. And did it make you at all angry that she had this whole nother life and these children that she cared about, when after all she's your mom?
In a way I did, because I was an only child and there was no dad in the house. So yeah, it was kind of like my mom was being taken away from me.
And you said you weren't sure about the love between Sally Fran's parents, or the relationship between her parents and your mom. Was there some inherent tension there? And how did Sally Fran's parents treat your mom?
I think they treated her well, but I mean, you know, she was black. But as a black person, I think they treated her well.
But there were probably a lot of social norms that many people would find hard to accept today, in terms of, for example, was she not allowed to eat supper with well, Sally Fran, maybe you can describe what it was like for May's mom, Mamie, working in your house. Was it like the help?
Yep, it was like that. I mean, she worked, it's hard to even talk about. She worked on the holidays, like Mamie worked, remember, May?
And the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays.
Saturdays and Sundays.
And then she'd babysit, stay over all night a lot of times.
That's right.
And then after work there at Sally Fran's home, she would go to Dr. Ross' office and clean there. So she was gone all day, every day.
And to make it even more complicated, Mamie's husband would work at Daddy's office with Mamie, cleaning up after that. So it made the day just, I mean, it's unbearable.
A 12-hour day.
Horrible.
How did your parents treat her? I mean, were there certain limitations, obviously, to the relationship?
Well, I think theirs was. You want to say, May?
No, it was. You know, it was. Like we say, that's back in the 60s. The younger people nowadays would not believe how things were back in the 60s. And being a child myself, I knew what was going on, but not as much as I would have known had I been older. But you can always look back at that.
Sandra,
but,
what?
You know,
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, May.
Well, my mom had to get the bus from the black neighborhood and transfer to another bus to the white neighborhood. And sometimes if she'd work late, Mrs. Ross would bring her home, but she always had to sit in the back seat. She couldn't sit in the front seat. She could not go in the front door. She had to go in the back door.
And did she have to eat her supper at a separate table? I mean, she would never join the family for any meals?
No, she didn't join the family. And I'm thinking, this was years ago, I'm thinking she ate at the table after the family ate.
And did she have a separate bathroom like they did in The Help?
Yes, ma'am.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Sandra, you know, reading about this, I know you're 46 years old, which seems very young to me. I hope you don't mind that I said that publicly. Tell me how you felt about this book and what you learned from this book, if anything.
Well, initially, I was just glad to see a book that gave voice to women, not just, you know, black women rather, but from that era, that is a very, well, need to tell anybody, very volatile period. So it's just fascinating. And I'm listening to this conversation, and I had no idea, because I just met these ladies, and this is incredible. So it's starting to make me challenge and reevaluate everything I read in The Help. But my impressions, like I said initially, I'm just glad to hear those voices.
How did you know, some African-American readers have criticized the book for having a very distinctive black dialect for the maids and virtually no dialect for the white families. And I'm curious how you felt about that when you read the book, Sandra.
When I read this book, I guess I'm auditory, and when I read, I give every character a voice. And because I'm so familiar with this, of course, with Jackson and that time period, I thought she did a great job with the language. She obviously has an ear for the language still, and an ear for the narrative as well. So I didn't think it was caricaturistic at all. Because it's been worse. I've seen worse. And so I thought she was very candid in it.
It was a really strong voice. That's what impressed me. I mean, it was not a weak voice. Like, you saw power in the white community, a socioeconomic sort of situation, but then you saw power by those words and the people. So the power, you saw kind of a contrast between two kinds of power that was just, it was, for me, and May and I've talked about it, it was like Mamie had a voice in that. And May had a voice.
I think she did well, because it would be like telling all these things the way things were then, and saying at the end of dinner, Minnie and Miss Tilly, whatever his name was, would go out to the pool and have a swim.
Yeah.
And then she'd have to come back in and go to her bathroom, the black bathroom, you know. So she kept it the way it should have been, and the language was like that at that time. Because in slavery time, you know, the blacks were not allowed to go to school or learn to read or anything. So they talk like that. You know, she's just being truthful.
I know, May, that you worked as a maid for about 10 years before you took a job, I guess, as a technician or working with an X-ray group. Is that right?
Yes.
But you had quite a different experience than your mom did, didn't you, when you worked as a maid?
Not really. I mean, I didn't sit down at the table and eat with them. I could use the bathroom. I could come in the front door. And I had my own car, so I guess you would say I think I could have rode in the front seat with her. But it was a big difference, but you still knew that you're black and you're the maid and they're white and they're superior.
Is there still an awful lot of racism in Jackson, Mississippi? And how has this book been received? Because, you know, when I talked to Kathryn Stockett about it, she said actually close members of her family weren't speaking to her in the wake of this book. And I'm just curious how people in Jackson, I mean, obviously it's not a monolithic community and everyone has different opinions, but in general, what have you heard people saying about the book, Sandra?
Actually, not much. And I think probably the reason it's back at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list is because it's starting to make its way into the black community, because I don't think initially you reread this book. I read it last March with my book club. But, so I haven't heard much talk on the street, as it were, about this particular book.
How about you? How about May and Sally Fran? What have you been hearing about it?
I don't belong to a book club. I don't read a lot. Sally Fran insisted that I read the book. And she said, no, and she promised me I wouldn't want to put it down if I started to read. She was telling the truth. It's a great, great book. I'm just not, I was into reading when I was younger. Now, I had 7 children, and it's kind of like I want my time, it may be selfish, but I want my time for me to do what I want to do, whether it's go shopping, watch TV, rearrange my furniture, whatever. I want this to be my time.
And Sally Fran, what about you? What are your friends saying about it? Do you have any white friends who are angry about the way because you know the black characters, in my opinion, have so much more humanity and elegance and depth, and other than Skeeter, who of course is the one really truly self-actualized white character, you know. They're not. The white community is certainly not portrayed in a very good light in this book.
Well, 2 things. I mean, it'll be. I was sitting there when May and I were talking at the beginning, and I was going, "Oh, wait until Lee sees this." My sister. I mean, we'll see how. I hope she reacts positive to it because we're telling the truth.
Yeah,
but I just hope so because that's just the way it was. It's just the way it was. And my aunt, my cousin, and my cousins and my aunts. But, you know, the thing about it is, where I work right now, it's black and white. You know, it's an office that has black folks and white folks. And so, you know, in that office, we've talked about the book. I'm not in a book club either, but we've talked about it, and not in detail about it. But there's a freedom where I work where it's not, you don't notice. I mean, I'm free. I'm very free at where I work to speak my mind and say my piece. And people there, black and white, are able to speak their mind and say their piece. And
is that unusual? Is that unusual in Jackson?
Not at all. I just don't. You know, it doesn't surprise me that the book may not have been as well received in certain circles of Jackson or the South even, but. We just like every place else, the more you watch the news, you find out we have our problems, but it's you have to keep things in their historical context. And that's why even conversations about the dialects now, it's better. It's definitely better. And I remember, because my elementary school was in Northeast Jackson, so I can remember seeing white women driving with little kids in the front seat. This is before, of course, you know, kids in the back seat. And black women in their white uniforms sitting in the back seat. And I was thinking, my mother would never let me ride in the front seat and an adult ride in the back seat. And one day I asked about it, and that's how I found out, you know, what that dynamic was. But you were talking about the humanity, Katie. What I was struck by was the total dysfunctionality between the mothers and the daughters. And I realized it's because they didn't know one another. Even Kathryn Stockett said, I mean, her mother brought her home. The lady who worked for them took her from her mother, took her out of her arms. So that's, I would imagine that Haley probably loved the lady who worked for her family because she and her mother didn't get along. May Mobley's mom and her mother didn't get along.
Yeah, Elizabeth or whatever. Yeah, that was an awfully strained and sad relationship. It was almost she really, really disliked her daughter, and the only love that May Mobley got was from Aibileen. And you know, it was really interesting and such a contrast to parenting today, where, you know, parents are almost over-involved with raising their children. You know, I was going to ask you, Sally Fran, you know, it's almost, oh, wait, before I do, I wanted to ask you, Sandra, I know that you were born just after Medgar Evers was killed, and I thought it was interesting when you asked your own mother what that summer was like. What did she say to you, Sandra?
It was hot.
Mm-hmm. And she never really elaborated, did she?
She didn't have to. I saw it in her face. Because she meant that literally and figuratively.
And Sally Fran, is there a little bit of Skeeter in you? When I read your reaction to the book and your relationship with Mamie reminded me of Skeeter's. I talk like these people are all real. Kathryn told me, you know, Katie, these are not real people. But Skeeter's relationship with Constantine, you know, when I read about your relationship with Mamie, it was so deep and so profound. And I think you were asking a lot of the questions Skeeter was asking in the book, weren't you, when you were younger?
You know, I can say this about Mamie, that it's not Mamie, it's Mamie. But I guess to show the depth, first of all, a lot of who I am has been formed by Mamie, and not the stuff that was on the surface in the book, but I mean really, really deep things, Katie. And whenever I got to be a grandmother, I had 4 grandchildren. And when I got to be a grandmother, and you start playing around with cute little names about what you're going to be called, it just hit me one day. I'm going to be Big Mama. You knew that, didn't you? Yeah, Mamie was Big Mama. And so, you know, I hope I'm not as big as Mamie. I'm not as big as Mamie is. But when they asked me what I wanted to be called, it wasn't a silly, cute, oh, this will be a fun kind of name. It was like, I want to be Big Mama. I mean, I want to love my grandchildren at a distance, maybe not as intimately as Mamie. I don't want to take away from their parents, you know, my daughters, but that's the kind of influence that Mamie had on me, that I wanted to be called her. It's like naming a child something. In reverse, I named myself after her, which I just think
that is powerful.
To me, it really is. It really is.
May I say something?
Sure.
As much, as bad as things were back then, I can truly say, even if Sally Fran don't agree, I'm talking about what I saw. There was a real relationship between my mom and Sally Fran. There was love there. I mean, I saw it. And Sally Fran, even after my mom retired, she still came by to check on my mom. She checked on my brother. I have a brother that I'm 19 years older than, so we're both like an only child. And she's just a wonderful person. And we've kept up with each other all this time. Sometimes we kind of lose a little contact, but then she'll find me or I'll find her.
Well,
but I didn't have my voice quite. I mean, I started getting my voice once I left Jackson. I mean, I use that term. May, she can say that she didn't have a voice, and she can say, I didn't speak out very much, but she did. We talked back in those days. I mean, we had a free line. I remember a free line of communication. I know I did with Mamie about, I don't understand this. Why? Why don't you? Mamie had never, you don't know whether you know that or not, but Mamie had never eaten in a white restaurant.
Yeah, I did.
She had never eaten until she went with us and wouldn't go. And I said, oh, yes, you are. I mean, and then it was like it was a really powerful thing when she actually went across the line and sat down in a restaurant. And I was just, that's amazing to me. But I didn't get my voice until later.
Well, see, being younger, when they start to allow us to go into white restaurants, my cousin and I, every weekend we try a different restaurant because all this was new to us. You know, we had to go to the greasy spoons, you know, or go to the back door and they would hand us a sandwich out. And we could go and be treated well, regardless of how they felt behind it. We were treated well once, you know, it opened up for us. But Sally Brand, even when after my mom retired, she reminds me of this all the time, how she came and washed Mom's feet and washed my mother's feet and trimmed them down for her, and she just did everything for her.
Aw, well, that's wonderful that you guys have had such a long-lasting relationship. And Sandra, before we go, are you looking forward to the movie? You know, it's so cool because Kathryn's childhood friend, a fellow named Tate Taylor, who's also from Jackson, is directing the movie version of The Help. And I don't know, I'm always reluctant to see the movie version of a book that I just love so much. How do you feel about the movie? Are you excited about it?
I'm very excited, particularly if it's going to be made here in Jackson. I mean, that would be, because it's so wonderful to see a street name. So, oh, I know that street. Yeah, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
I hope they will not just do it on a soundstage in L.A. or whatever, but it's wonderful, and I'm excited.
Well,
and all those buildings that were mentioned in the book are still here. Some of the Virginia 14 is still there. It's just has a name change, but it's still there. And Fortification Street and Woodrow Wilson Bridge, all of that.
Fornication Street.
Well, I can't wait. I can't wait to see the movie. I was really sad when I finished the book because it was one of those books where you just don't want it to end. So I cried not only because of the ending, but I cried because the book was over. And I'm glad that you all liked it as well. Sally, Fran, and May and Sandra, I really appreciate you talking to me. And I think that you all might stick around and talk a little more after I say goodbye. I just have this feeling.
It's a good
You're probably right.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. It was really nice meeting all of you. Appreciate it.
Nice to meet you.
And I'd like to say thank you to all of you who tweeted questions for Kathryn Stockett and to all our book clubs who participated in this show. Now stay tuned for a message from our sponsor, Dove.